when the 70,000-ton steel beast suddenly turned around at the edge of the South China Sea, and the huge formation of multinational ships silently circled thousands of kilometers, a question emerged: was this a prudent strategic evasion by the Royal Navy, or an embarrassing metaphor for the end of the British Empire's maritime power? The waters of the South China Sea in early July 2025 witnessed this silent but deafening strategic retreat. The British HMS Prince of Wales turned southward at a distance from Chinese territorial waters, crossing the Sunda Strait in Indonesia and hastily heading to Australia. The British aircraft carrier HMS Prince of Wales turned southward a stone's throw away from China's territorial waters, crossed Indonesia's Sunda Strait and hurriedly sailed to Australia, crushing the freedom of navigation vow it had loudly proclaimed before departure into the air. The oath of freedom of navigation, which had been loudly proclaimed before the ship's departure, was crushed in the waves created by the propeller's rewind to 3 months ago. When this 70,000-ton ship set sail from the Portsmouth harbor, it was a sight to behold. The British Ministry of Defence will be packaged as the most ambitious maritime power display of the century by the Spanish Basin-class frigate, Norway, the world's smallest Aegis ship, Nansen-class, Canada's ship age of more than 30 years of Halifax-class frigates, and other 12 countries' ships put together into the International column. Commodore Blackmore, commander of the fleet, even said to cross the Taiwan Strait, threatening to fill the U.S. in the Asia-Pacific deterrence gap. The Daily Telegraph even used the title, Prince of Wales will prove that the British Empire is still the defender of the rules of the sea, to build up momentum, ignoring the mockery of military experts on its multinational tours. However, when this paper fleet arrived in Singapore on June the 23rd, confidence began to disintegrate. At that time, the Chinese Navy Shandong ship formation has just finished the Western Pacific high-intensity training, with Yan'an ship, Zhangjiang ship and other elite ships to cut through the waves into Hong Kong's Victoria Harbor. Officers and soldiers on deck discharged national security and good home giant letters. Hong Kong fireboats gushing 3 Watergate salute to welcome this scene, symbolizing the return of sovereignty and the British colonial history of the memory of a sharp contrast. This scene symbolizing the return of sovereignty is in sharp contrast to the memory of British colonial history. More alert to the British side is that the Liaoning activities in the South China Sea at the same time, dual aircraft carriers to form a strategic echo, South China Sea islands and reefs on the Dongfeng 2-1D anti-ship missiles range covers the entire sea, space-based satellites, shore-based radar and electronic reconnaissance planes weave a monitoring network, has long since transformed this area of the waters of China's strategic home turf. On July the 1st, a dramatic turn of events took place. The Prince of Wales quietly abandoned its plan to cross the South China Sea, and instead took a detour through the Sunda Strait to Australia. The British Ministry of Defence to F-35B hydraulic failure, and to catch up with the military exercise schedule, to stall public opinion. But this set of statements are full of loopholes. Faulty fighter aircraft as early as June the 14th stayed in India. The real reason for this is that a British naval officer has said that the aircraft had to be repaired in India as early as June the 14th, and that the distance around the Sunda Strait was 1,000 kilometers more than that through the South China Sea. The real reason surfaced in a confession by a British naval officer to Jane's Defence Weekly. When the radar screen flashed dozens of high-speed moving targets, everyone understood that breaking through would be tantamount to self-disgrace. At this time, the two ships are less than 1,000 kilometers away from each other, completely within the combat radius of the J-15 carrier aircraft, and any collision may put Britain in an unbearable strategic dilemma. The brutal reality of the comparison of strengths tore apart the last vestiges of imperial decency. Although the Prince of Wales, tonnage slightly more than the Shandong ship, but the actual carrying only 12 F-35B, far inferior to the Shandong ship's 36 J-15 fleet. The British ship lacks fixed-wing early warning aircraft support, command capability first lost to chip. The so-called combined fleet escort lineup is even more shabby. The core is only a 45 type destroyer, dreadnought, and the age of more than 20 years of the 23 type frigate, Richmond. The rest are all allies cobbled together. OEM, Norway provided the world's smallest Aegis ship, Canada sent rusty old ship, Spain frigate, even because the radar system is not compatible with, difficult to integrate into the chain of command. On the contrary, China's 055 type 10,000-ton destroyer carrying the Eagle, 21 hypersonic missiles, Mach 6 breakout speed and range of 800 kilometers constitutes a carrier killer deterrent. Its firepower density far exceeds the British fleet air defense limit. This uncontested defeat exposed the structural collapse of the British Navy. The ship has been used as a spare parts store for sister ship HMS Queen Elizabeth since the propeller shaft broke in 2022, and only minimal repairs were made before the expedition. Military spending has shrunk to 2.1% of GDP under the dilemma. Even the shipborne aircraft need to be borrowed from the Royal Air Force, the former glory of a single ship to deter an empire, reduced to rely on borrowed ships to sea to support the appearance of the situation. Tom Shaughnessy, a researcher at the International Institute for Strategic Studies in London, hit the nail on the head when he said, when deterrence becomes a multinational role-playing game, the myth of the sunset is completely bankrupt. Britain's domestic court of public opinion instantly exploded. The Daily Mail front page, moment of shame, headline like a whip. The Times denounced this move to tarnish the tradition of the Royal Navy. The social media poisonous tongue splashed, and vegetables and love to play do not have the ability to go to other people's doorsteps to pick a fight, and other mockery brush screen. More netizens rehash the old history to tease. Chinese Navy, with a chopstick can beat us. This chopstick is a metaphor for the reversal of power between the two sides since the Opium War in 1840. The geopolitical dominoes then tumbled. The Philippine Department of Defense originally planned to use the British ship docked in Manila to push the garrison agreement, but unexpectedly the fleet detour to make its calculations failed. Manila University professor pointed out that the four countries are actually the United States of America, to kill the victim of the knife. Japan's Ministry of Defense internal report questioned when the aircraft carrier to avoid the South China Sea. The so-called deepening security cooperation is just diplomatic rhetoric. The most symbolic is that the British Ministry of Defense internal documents show that the plan to cross the Taiwan Strait has been permanently deleted from the agenda. The August visit to Japan will still go around the Philippine Sea to avoid the South China Sea. A set of tactical weakness, combination punch, completely buried the Victorian era of gunboat diplomacy legacy. The cycle of history is always engraved between the waves of the coordinates. 1895 Britain can still lead the three countries to intervene in the return of Liao to force the Qing dynasty. 1949 Zhishiying in the Yangtze River by the People's Liberation Army shelling ran aground has shown decadence, and now 70,000 tons of giant ships before the war to avoid the trajectory. The Imperial Sea Power finally played a sound of peace and security, finally played a requiem for the Imperial Sea Power when the Prince of Wales circled 4,000 nautical miles to Darwin Harbor. Shandong ship's radar screen. 37 Chinese fishing boats are sailing to the fishing grounds of Huanian Island. The five-star red flag in the masts of the Marine Police ship flying once needed the global colonies to feed the Royal Navy, now rely on a multinational patchwork to voyage. And China's independent research and development of the aircraft carrier formation has been in the doorstep to build a steel wall, South China Sea balance. So in the giant ship's trajectory and the completion of the century tilt, British aircraft carrier propeller stirring the Indian Ocean salty seawater, but no longer stir the power pattern of the Pacific Ocean when its deck reflects the pale light under the hot sun of Darwin Harbor. The J-15 of the Shandong ship is skimming over the Tsingma Bridge in Hong Kong. History has never disappeared, it has only changed the protagonist.